Good evening, my peoples. Happy Wednesday to everyone's. How you feeling today? Are you blessed and highly favored of the Lord? Ooh, we had a lot of cliches, didn't we? Before reconstruction, blessed, highly favored, then you realized, oh, if God favors me and not the rest of the world, that's really not fair. It's not just, is it? It's not a good God.
There's a song, D.E, that we sing pretty often. I'll tell you which one later.
Yeah.
And I'm just struggling with it so much for that reason. If that favor, and that's hard, but I'm not saying we won't sing it.
Yeah.
But at least this is our PSA, that when we sing it, we're wishing all of us have equal favor.
Let me tell you what the beautiful culture is that Brandy and I have created with a wonderful team of people at Spirit and Truth Sanctuary. And that is we look at the Bible critically. Doesn't mean we throw it away. We're really more post-critical than critical. Means we've gone through some questioning and we still think it's worthy of keeping, just with a sense of discernment. But with that, we've gotten rid of a lot of songs, a lot of lyrics. But I would tell you that the kind of core group that of the leaders at Spirit and Truth Sanctuary, we still enjoy singing some bad theology occasionally. We're like, man, I know we don't believe this really, but ooh, that's a good song. Can we just sing that again? Yeah, we are comfortable. What is it? What does Doc Holliday say? I am comfortable in my hypocrisy. No, my hypocrisy knows no bounds. Any Tombstone fans out there? My hypocrisy knows no bounds. So I get it that I'm a theologian and an aspiring biblical scholar, and I should have better theology than to sing certain songs, but some of those songs just feel good, and we're working. We're a work in progress.
Some of it is just cultural.
It's our culture.
Occasionally, we just want to feel good, and we just want to be nostalgic, and we can sing it, but we can also reframe it, represent it.
If you notice, when we sing a song that has some questionable lyrics, usually the person coming to the mic next will take about 30 seconds and kind of explain it a little bit. We'll massage it a little bit. You know, we still sing that song, if you confess the Lord, call him up. If you believe in the Father and the Holy Ghost. Yeah, well, we don't believe confessing the Lord is necessary to salvation. We believe in a finished work of salvation. And so, yeah, we're getting there, but we still are a little bit sentimental. Anyway, welcome tonight. We're glad you're here. This is our Inclusion 101 series. We're coming up on Bishop Pearson's birthday. I believe this would be his 72nd birthday, March the 19th. His 72nd birthday, and we are still finding the brilliance of this. Still right in the middle of just discovering all the wisdom, all the courage that he left to us. And so welcome tonight. We're glad you're here. If you're curious, if you're cautious, if you're concerned, if you're in the midst of deconstruction or reconstruction, if you're at the beginning of it, if you've never heard that word, whatever brought you here, you're safe with us tonight. All right, let's grab our devotion for today. It is March the 12th. We're in the month of the power of now, and our devotion today is get happy, stay happy, be happy. Please know that this is not an attempt at denial. It's not an attempt at get over it. It's not an encouragement toward spiritual bypassing. Our feelings are real. Injustice is real. The world that is hurting and reeling at times is very real. But our happiness, our peace, is not necessarily at the mercy of external conditions. Doesn't mean we're not aware of them. Doesn't mean we don't speak truth to power. Doesn't mean we don't protest certain systemic injustices. What it does mean is that our nature is not unhappiness. Our nature is not, we may be oppressed, but we don't take on the pain body of oppression. Frederick Douglass said, without struggle there is no progress, but don't drown in the struggle. And so we can be in the struggle, we can be in the storm, and not let it always be in us. There is a rage that comes from generative or generational oppression, but there are also outlets of how to let that out. All right, let's grab our affirmation for get happy, stay happy, be happy. Today I will put consistent effort towards getting happy, staying happy, and being happy. So how does happiness come our way? Do we just kind of happen upon the happiness? Is it by chance? Is it when all the things fall into place? Is it when the right person is in office? Is it when we find the right spouse or land the right job? How do we really achieve happiness? Well, if we have all of these things all these tumblers that have to fall into place to unlock the mystery of happiness, we probably will be waiting for happiness for a long time. I'm not necessarily anti-eschatology. I do think Jesus has already returned on the day of Pentecost. It's called the Spirit, when the Spirit was poured out on all flesh and awakened within us. However, if you have a different eschatology, it's not a deal breaker here. What I do perceive, though, is dangerous about a one-day rapture, a one-day being taken out of misery, is that it keeps us somewhat acquiescent to unhappiness now. It keeps us locked into an idea that we're never going to be happy in this lifetime, and it's just the cross that we're supposed to carry. And of course, I'm try to remain aware of my privilege, yet there have been some really dark seasons in my life. I have still tried to strive for happiness and joy and peace. It can be a daily practice to choose happiness, even in the midst of very difficult circumstances. Recent advances in science let us know that happiness is more than just a feeling. It's a state of being that encompasses our mind, our heart, watch this, and even our cells. Our cellular makeup is affected by our attitudes. If you've ever been around hospitals for a lengthy period of time, you will find that people who go through surgeries or trauma, when they come out of it, their attitude toward their recovery can dictate how long the recovery takes, or at least it can affect it in some ways. And so we choose to be happy. It's good for us to choose happiness. Just like we can exercise for 6 months and expect the benefits to remain for the rest of our lives, you can't work on cultivating happiness for a short period of time and expect permanent change. It's a lifetime of choosing to be happy. And so there's some suggestions about keeping a gratitude journal. Sometimes you can keep a journal in your mind, thinking on the good things about God. Those are ways to be grateful. If there be anything good, think on these things. Anything praiseworthy, anything noteworthy, meditate on these things. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Get those hands up and tell him thank you. Amen. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. All right, let's grab our prayer at the very bottom together. Source of happiness within. Help me to know that happiness is something I can cultivate with consistent practice. Amen, church. All right, welcome once again to Bishop Carlton D. Pearson's Gospel of Inclusion, or Inclusion 101. This has been our textbook for more than a year now. We are in week 56, and we're going to talk tonight about living in the black and white. Let me give you just a quick introduction about black and white. So there's so many different ways to unpack this understanding of the lower nature of absolute thought. Black and white, the Apostle Paul might enjoin us to remember that the literal kills, but the Spirit brings life. Black and white can be very subjugating to ideas of nuance, the nuances of individuality, meaning there is not a corporate rule that you can apply to every single human being on the face of the earth. It just doesn't work that way. There are cultures, there are certain identity markers, there are experiences, there are predispositions toward things. There are not many things that are absolute throughout the universe. Jesus lets us kind of know of three. Three absolutes. Love God, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Those are pretty black and white there. Okay, but there's even some nuance there because it's backwards. Jesus gave it to us backwards. We can't love our neighbor if we don't love ourselves, and we can't really love God whom we haven't seen if we can't love our neighbors whom we have seen. And so even in that absolute statement that kind of is universal in most major world religions, we still have some need for ambiguity, to lean in to the openness of even that absolute, to say, yeah, but that doesn't really work if you just love God first, others second, and me last. If you don't have love, you can't give it. So you can't love your neighbor as yourself if you hate yourself, right? So, or if you have a low self-esteem, or born in sin, shapen in iniquity. All that to say this, that absolute thought is the lowest rung of consciousness. Things being black and white, being in the binary. That if you'll stay with me, men, tonight, the male construct can be very rigid at times, very concrete. We're going to talk about that some on Sunday with the two different Genesis creation stories. Did you know there were two creation stories in Genesis? We're going to talk the differences of both of those, Genesis 1 through chapter 3 on Sunday. And so in that way, there's a Genesis story that is very fluid, very charitable toward a God that is a little bit more mysterious than our finding out. And then there is one that's more rigid. This is exactly how God created the heavens and the earth. Well, the writer of those books, we're pretty sure as scholars, was not even Moses. It's just attributed to Moses. But that person wasn't there when God created the heavens and the earth. They don't know. And so these concrete ideas of thinking that we've got things figured out really is kind of a westernized male patriarchal construct. We now see the pushback of that with postmodernism, which is the pendulum swing from solidity, from rigidity and inflexibility, is the postmodern approach to everything is relative. We can reduce everything to, I don't know, there's not really an answer to it. And so probably there is some moderation or some balance between the rigidity of absolute thought and the pendulum swing of relativism. Everything's not relative. There are some things that we can hold as true and solid. And so in that way, I want to encourage you tonight to be thinking, not just with your absolute mind, but be thinking with your abstract mind tonight, your left frontal cortex, your mystic receptivity, your spiritual oneness that allows you to hold two things can be true at the same time. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. There can be some gray areas, whether that is in the roles that we play in life, whether that be in our sexuality. You may be born white, but you have a feeling of empathy toward cultures that might be disenfranchised. Things do not have to be mutually exclusive of each other. Okay, and so in that way, let's let go of monolithic approaches to understanding truth, and let's settle into a little bit of surrender to mystery, to the beginner's mind tonight. Amen? All right, let's grab our questions for this week, and then we'll jump right in. Question 1. Does refusing the duality of the tree of knowledge result in relativism? We just talked about that. That's what postmodernism brings to us. Does refusing the duality of the tree of knowledge result in a reduction to everything just being relative? There's no real truths of anything. Number 2, does a deconstruction from devil-ology, doesn't mean you have to throw the devil away, but at least consider the idea that it's not as powerful as God, and if there is a devil, it came from God. A plethora of scriptures that it works for God most of the time. Does a deconstruction from devil-ology mean we will have a lack of morality? So do we need a devil? Do we need understandings of sin to inform our morality? Isn't that interesting? Yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll unpack it tonight. Number 3, do you perceive an end to dualistic thinking in our lifetimes? Do you perceive that there is an end to these constructs of good and evil, and then those being clear lines of separation? Or is it even possible for the human mind or the collective human consciousness to perceive an end to duality? Let me give you some really beautiful allegory and metaphor. In the book of Revelation, which I'm not a huge fan of because I think it's very violent and it's a poetic book that's taken literally. And so in that way, I take it with a grain of salt. But there's some beautiful imagery there that in this new heaven, in this new Jerusalem, this new earth, this redeemed earth, that the predator will lie down with the prey. I'll give you a quick icebreaker here. A lot of us say the lion will lie down with the lamb. That's nowhere in the Bible. It just somehow became something we adopted. When will the lion lie down with the lamb? It's nowhere. It's like wolf or young leopard, something of that nature. But it's not lion. Anyway, that's kind of minutia. But the picture that we get is that Brandon and I are watching this show right now called The Americas. Are you guys watching this? Narrated by Tom Hanks. It's a fascinating show. So much beauty of nature, but there are some really, really difficult moments to watch when animals start eating each other. They start preying upon each other. They start drowning the babies of other great killer whales start drowning dolphins, and then they just eat them, or just throw their bodies around. Or it's vicious. Nature is vicious. Everything in me wants there to be a synchronous harmony where we can get into this higher synthesis of being at one. But nature seems to be somewhat set against itself. There is, as beautiful as the Lion King is and the circle of life, it is not beautiful when something that you love is being eaten in front of you. That's difficult. It's difficult to watch that. And so, will we ever be able to realize in the collective human consciousness or universally a sense of oneness? And I know that smacks of syncretization or pluralistic thinking, or even cultural assimilations. I'm certainly not trying to take anyone's culture away from them, but I am encouraging us to just think tonight that when we separate ourselves by culture, we can celebrate culture without separating ourselves by it. Culture is beautiful. All of our culture should be celebrated. I certainly, especially pastoring for over 30 years, a predominantly African American church, I understand the thievery of colonization with taking away African ancestry and culture. And I do get that. And I think we should celebrate culture without it separating. We can celebrate without separate, right? We can acculturate, which means we still have our culture, but we don't let it separate us, and we don't steal someone's culture or force them to take ours, but it enhances a conversation of one humanity. Maybe that's a beautiful way of saying that. Okay, let's jump in. Week 56, Living in Black and White, pages 76 and 77. Duality is the doctrine that mankind is under the influence of two opposing principles. A lot of that comes from Zoroastrianism, often perceived as good and evil. Both are woven deeply into our psyche and are central to our being. If you think on it long enough, it becomes you. Yet people and actions are judged as good or evil, with no gray area in between. This contributes to our intolerance for views and cultures that differ from our own, and religions, and impedes our efforts to improve the lot of our fellows. Guilt-ridden over our own capacity for evil, we cripple our ability to love ourselves, much less our brothers and our sisters. Woohoo! So what does that mean? When we perceive that we are good, inherently good, made in the image and likeness of God and good, but we still have a capacity for evil, what does that mean? Does that mean we're intrinsically evil, or that we're capable of doing evil things? I am going to lay out some ideas of creation on Sunday, especially about the void, what's called in academic circles the Tahomic hermeneutic. What is the water? What is the darkness? What are the watery depths? What is this void, this spirit hovering over this vibrating earth thing that needs to be reshaped in some ways? Is the chaos negative? And who told us it was negative? Is the chaos positive? The void, the emptiness, is it a positive thing or a negative thing? Or is it by nature, is it really neutral, and it takes on the vibration that we bring to it? Ooh, that's a lot, isn't it? So we could put power in that framework. Is power evil? Certainly can be channeled that way, seeing some of that working in domination and fascism at times. Is power good? It can be used for good, but probably power at its core is more neutral, and it can be channeled or circumvented in certain ways, right? All right, let's keep going. The inevitable result is a spirit of murder. We murder people and cultures. We kill our personal relationships and hopes in our future. Our hopes in our future. We kill people, religions. That's what the Crusades were about. That's what Constantine was all about. Robbing Rome and the Roman Empire of a diversity of religions or diverse religious expression, and forcing people to become Christians that we see as a threat to our worldview. We judge. Here we go. This is 1 John chapter 3 and verse 12. It says, "Do not be like Cain, who belonged to the evil one and murdered his brother." How did Cain belong to the evil one if he was made by God? He had the capacity to do evil things, but was he made? Did he belong to the evil one? Let's ask this question. Did Judas belong to the evil one? Or was there a capacity? The Gospel of Judas is certainly an interesting take on this, this conversation, where Judas doesn't want to betray Jesus, but Jesus begs him to do it for the advent of the cross, or crucicentrism. We talk about that in scholarly circles. But in essence, is someone evil, or are we are we neutral, capable of applying our power in different ways? And why did he murder him? Because his own actions were evil and his brothers were righteous. I'm doing some study right now. I won't go too deep into this, about the origins of blood sacrifice, and the figural parallelism between Abraham and Isaac, the father figure sacrificing a son as a substitutionary type of thing, as God sacrificing his son. But in that way, we come into this kind of blood narrative. Well, some of it begins, at least in the Christian canon, or the Hebrew and Christian canon, or the Hebrew Bible, with the idea of Cain's sacrifice not pleasing God. Do you remember what Abel's sacrifice was to God? First of all, where did these concepts come from? They're in a garden. Why does God need sacrifice? You ever asked yourself that question? Why does God need a sacrifice in the garden of perfection? Why is the writer putting into this narrative a God that needs and demands sacrifice? There has been no sin. Chew on that. Because we adopted that from all different types of cultures that were around us. Yeah, we adopted a God that needs sacrifices from other spaces. So, in that way, Cain's sacrifice to God was some of his vegetables. And the writer tries to say that they were like rotten vegetables. I think that's a little bit dishonest. But Abel's sacrifice was more pleasing to God because it was blood. Abel gave or sacrificed one of the lambs. Where does that come from? And why does God prefer blood sacrifice over vegetable sacrifice? And why does there need to be sacrifice in the garden? So, how does that play into these ideas? Cain is now murderous because he was evil, because he didn't give God a blood sacrifice. He only gave God the sacrifice of the way he worked. See, when you begin the process of discerning the cultural and the historical criticisms that are necessary for understanding where the Bible comes from and how it functions in the world, we begin to question things that we've never even thought of before. Yeah, and so why is Cain murderous? Why does he belong to the evil one? Because he didn't agree with Zoroastrian paganistic blood sacrifice? And why does God demand that in the first place? What type of God creates the universe, and then if it's upset, it gets happy with blood? Think peoples, think with me tonight. All right, notice the distinction that led to the first act of violence. His actions were evil, and his brothers were righteous. Why were Abel's actions righteous? Because they're in the narrative of blood sacrifice. This is the first hint as to why God did not want Adam and Eve to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Their action ushered into the world the curse of moralism, which has been the primary calamity of human history. Spirituality and grace were replaced by the pursuit of moralism as man became consumed with the battle between the opposing forces of good and evil within him. Christian moralism, here we go more specifically, has become the battle cry of the so-called religious right in America. I've heard Bishop Pearson and others in that genre say many times that you can be sexually pious and morally corrupt. Especially in recent years. It has basically polarized the nation, causing a kind of religious Cold War. Think about when this book was written. This book was written way before there was the expression of what we're experiencing today. I think I know the year, but I want to kind of be sure. So this book is 2006. And so think about 20 years ago, 2006. 20 years ago, Bishop Pearson was saying that the nation is divided over a religious Cold War. What would he be saying today? Yeah, what would he think about this? Our obsession with moralism allows us to buttress our self-esteem with the delusion that we are soldiers of God in a fight against evil. How do we realize camaraderie in Christendom, the Christian church, without common enemies? Is that the base level of our camaraderie? That we work together great because we hate the same people? We demonize the same cultures, religions, holy books, people? Yeah, I think we're better than that. I think we're higher than having to need enemies to foster camaraderie. We can be comrades in love. We can find solidarity in good doing, in mercy, in inclusivity, in empathy, compassion. These can be just as what's the word I'm looking for? Solidifying or endearing. These can endear us to each other just as much as fighting against the devil or a false religion of some sort. Can I just tell you this? Every religion is false. There is not a true religion. It doesn't exist. It never has. It never will. Because man's ideas and culture are involved with it. The only true religion really is the beginner's mind. Is emptying out of your conditionings, of your filters, of your lenses. I'm just all in it tonight. All right. Aren't I, everyone? Sorry. Y'all forgive my craziness. Let's see. So we fight against and curse one another based on our perceptions of right and wrong. I heard Reverend Christian Smith, one of his social media posts a couple weeks ago, he said, so many Christians are upset with me because I cuss. I say cuss words. But you go to church every Sunday and your pastor curses you. Think about that for a minute. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah.
You're mad that I say a cuss word or cuss words, but you go and hear a message cursing your soul. You're born in sin, shaped in iniquity. You're bound for hell. You need a savior. You're a sinner. Yeah. So think about the straining of a gnat and swallowing a camel. Missing the point of the main thing. That you're worried somebody's being inappropriate to what would be acceptability in some kind of westernized purity culture of saying words. A cuss word is more offensive than cursing someone, damning someone's soul? Or what about this? Cursing 6 billion souls that haven't accepted Jesus as their Lord and Savior. Which is more brutal? Saying shit or damn or whatever your words are. I'm going to save you from the big ones tonight because I know you may not be able to handle it. Or is it the cursing or the perceptions that 6 billion people are cursed for eternity in a customized torture chamber where you get a special body that can burn but never get burnt up? What is the cuss and the curse? Think on it, people. Let's grow up a little bit tonight. All right, maybe you already are. That's why you're here.
They can probably handle it, but I would kill you.
I'll say frickety flack flick anytime I want to.
Don't you do it.
We fight against each other, curse each other based on our perceptions of right or wrong. We evaluate people as black or white, rich or poor, educated or uneducated. James 1:8 says, "A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways." Double-mindedness degrades diversity, the binary, needing things to be one thing or another. That's really, I think, the pushback a bit against our trans brothers and sisters right now. It's when you can't define somebody, you can't categorize them, and you can't initially or ultimately disqualify them. Yeah, it's so bizarre to me, the male narratives that we place on God. God is a he, God is a father, God is a man, that he should not lie. You know, God is not gendered. God is spirit. We worship in spirit and in truth. If you really want to dive deep tonight, y'all ready for this? Bum, 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 bum. God is probably best understood as both, having male and female expression. So God is either intersexual or bisexual, or God is non-binary. Yeah, God does not have a specific gender. God speaks and it becomes. And so that the sperm and the egg are all happening in that one creative divine moment. Yet, and watch this, and at least one of the creation accounts says that Adam, man, not male, human, Adam, the female was taken out of the human. What does that mean? Does that mean that Adam had the capacity for both genders? Just really think about so many different troublings of the scripture that we've accepted as simplistic our whole lives. But are they that simplistic, or are they more complicated? All right, let's see. It tills the ground, this judgmental prejudice toward others, tills the ground for the growth of an outlook that encourages us to be at war with everything. Anybody raised in spiritual warfare? Everything around us was always an attack of the enemy. If it wasn't an attack of the enemy, it was a test from God. God's testing you, testing your faith, like Job right now. But true morality requires choice. One cannot be considered obedient if there's no possibility of disobedience. There's the neutrality. So it's not necessarily good or bad. It's possibilities. Yeah. Without heat, we would not recognize cold. Without light, we would not understand darkness. Were it not for death, we could not fully appreciate the miracle of life. In other words, opposites define who we are and make possible the comprehension of the greatest blessings of our lives, which is awareness. Duality is necessary for us to fully live, and yet when we become fixated on it as a frame for defining the world, we abandon morality for simplistic games of good against evil. As children of God, we are far more complicated. I think that peace probably is incubated by complicated conversations. It's just not as easy. It's just not simplistic. I was talking with my son a couple of days ago about the after effects of slavery, of Reconstruction, of Jim Crow, of women's suffrage, of many of the painful histories of America, and how those can still play in the subconscious of Americans. It still can kind of dictate at times approaches, defense mechanisms, filters, how we see things. Yeah, one of my newest closer friends, Dr. Larry Reed Live, doesn't hold back much of what he wants to say. He's going to say what he's got to say. But he'll call me occasionally and say, "Hey, D.E., I did a teaching tonight about white people, but I want you to know that I'm not talking about you." And I go, I get it. I know. I understand that with the history, your history and the history of your people, that there is quite a bit of distrust and a jaundiced approach to anything that smacks of whiteness. I get it. But he wants to make sure that I know that he doesn't feel that way about me personally. Look, it's just going to take some time for us as Americans to work through these painful histories. And the more that we deny them, the more that the healing is kind of held at bay. doesn't mean you can't individually heal, but there are corporate healings, collective healings that only take place as we kind of own up to some things and see it for what was and is. And so, all right, my peoples, let's grab the 3 questions real quickly. Let's talk about some complex things tonight. Does refusing the duality of the tree of knowledge result in relativism? That there's no truth anywhere. Everything's gray. And does a deconstruction from devil-ology mean we have a lack of morality? Who do we blame things on? Without law, without hell, we could put with that devil-ology could be kind of an entry point to a lot of things. What makes us moral beings? Is it written codes? Is it fear? Does fear keep us moral? And number 3, do you perceive an end to dualistic thinking in our lifetimes? What are you doing? What are you laughing at? You telling me I'm going too long?
No. I'll tell you in just a second.
All right. Let's talk, people. She's doing sign language. I'm like, what are you talking about?
I'm sorry. I think I'm a little sleepy and I'm getting a little delirious. So, no, I was actually looking at D.E. while he was talking, and I was going to ask you, is this a new shirt?
It is, yeah, and it's too big.
It's a new shirt. No, I don't think it looks... I mean, I don't know. I can't tell if it's too big or not.
It's that brand I like, that it's very breathable.
Yeah.
But it's weird because the arms are too tight, and all this is too, like, bunchy. But I want to wear it and not waste the money. I can't send it back now.
So D.E. could feel me looking at him and staring him down like, did he get a new shirt? Okay.
Yeah, I did. And I have suits made out of this that I preach in that are amazing because I can wash them in the washing machine. If you preach long enough, you can't send it to the cleaners. You got to put some soap on that thing, people. But yeah, I'm not happy with my shirt, but I don't like to waste, so I'm wearing them joints anyway.
Okay, really quickly want to say hello to Luis Mencia, who says he's driving, so can't share much, but is definitely tuned in.
And our sister church in Recife, Brazil had their first service, and they sent us... Reverend Louis sent us some really sweet videos of everybody saying hello to Spirit and Truth Sanctuary, thanking us for our support. And so we're just so proud of the work that you're doing. Thanks, Louis.
So I love this. Michelle shared, this is before we jump into the question, Bishop Paulk said something very pertinent. We behave just like the animals of nature. We chew up the weak and disenfranchise. And I just thought it was
goodness. Isn't that's a predator-prey narrative, isn't it? Yeah, that capitalism... privilege can really just hegemony, prevailing dominant cultures can prey upon those who are on the margins of society. Let me throw you another piece into this, Michelle. Sometimes there are cultural shifts, and those who were marginalized begin to realize a little bit of centrality. Sometimes those who were forced to the absolute margins of society, as Howard Thurman would say, what do we do with a religion that was formed with those with their backs against the wall? That's the Jesus and the disinherited. But sometimes those people who were marginalized find their way over time a little bit more central than what happens at times. Once they gain some level of acceptance in the center, they push someone else out to the margins or keep someone else disenfranchised, whether that's the Q+ community, the trans community, immigrants. All of us in some sort of violent hierarchy can push others to the margins, right, Michelle? But yeah, I certainly see that. It's very frustrating to watch.
She also shared, Bishop Paulk, you and Pastor Brandy are very brave. Many clergy would never have said there is no such thing as a pure religion.
Doesn't exist. Yeah.
Okay.
Even New Thought, even inclusion.
That's true.
Even inclusion is not a pure religion. Of course, I probably know it as good as most, but there's places that are contradictory even in inclusive thought. There is no one religion. The religion is you, your awareness, your ability to hear from Spirit.
So a couple funny things about cussing. Tamara said, I love you because you cuss. It makes me feel good because I cuss too.
Is that Tamara Summers?
Yes. Andy Allison said, I don't cuss, but my wife does.
She does it good for both of you.
Yeah. Aaron McClary basically agreed that his wife won't let him cuss. Mike said, I like to cuss using the C word, Christian.
That's a cuss word, isn't it?
Leave it to Mike.
I will cuss you, but I won't curse you. Amen.
Oh, that's funny. All right. So again, a couple comments before we jump into the actual numbers here, or excuse me, the 3 questions. So Andy, Allison shared, I understand. Well, I guess what I want to say is I'm curious if anyone can relate. I understand that God is genderless, but my upbringing will not allow me to get away from saying he.
Yeah.
Which it's so
accepted in the English language.
It's programmed in to say he. And I will say, the he, she, saying he or her for God was so different. I think the first time I really ever saw it was when years ago, almost 20 years ago now, when I went to Michael Beckwith's music conference and we sang about Mother God. Mm-hmm. And even at that time, it was like, ooh, is this okay? But you know what? What book changed that for us radically? That idea of seeing God as a mother, as a woman.
What book?
What book? / movie.
Oh, the Shack.
Yes.
Yeah, the Shack.
Yes,
yeah.
And I just have always been so grateful for that.
Octavia Spencer, working it as the father.
But even before the movie came out, I had read the book several times. It's so vivid and it's so easy to see God as this loving mother. Mm-hmm. So that really changed it for me. But even sometimes it's funny when we sing certain songs. There was something we did this past Sunday, and I need to remember what it was, but I want to say he and she in it. Mm-hmm. I want to change the word because it will fit nicely. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's just second nature to say he.
He is God, she is
Anybody
God.
Anybody can relate?
God. Some Reverend. So there's 2 things to that as well, Reverend Allison. One is sometimes when you're reading academic work, there will be a little bit of a disclaimer up front. That like I'm reading a scholar named Peter Enns, a fabulous scholar. He's a professor at Southeastern Seminary. And he says up front, he says, look, I don't believe God is gendered, but I'm going to say he throughout this entire book because I don't want God's gender to be a distraction to what I'm trying to say here. But please know that I don't believe God is a male. I'm just going to use the he because it's commonly accepted in the English language. And so... and then I follow a scholar named Dan McClellan, who when he refers to God, he refers to they. He refers to, in Christianity, we might say a Godhead. I don't know that he subscribes specifically to a Trinitarian idea of God, but the they of the gods, let us make man in our image, likenesses, coming from the Greco-Roman Divine Council. And so there's so many different ways to do that, but I do get how that feels, Reverend Allison.
All right, number 1. Does refusing the duality of the tree of knowledge result in relativism? Richard shared, not really. Who gets to decide what is good or bad, right or wrong? Relativism implies a connection or something that is considered in comparison or relationships to others. Duality implies a contrast, a definite difference as opposed to a relation.
That's really well said. Yeah, beautiful. Richard, thank you. Yeah, the contrast, man, think about what we know by contrast. Isn't it interesting to take just a drop of water, and if you put it through a prism, what we think is one thing is not one thing. It's Roy G. Biv, right, Brandy? What is Roy G. Biv, Brandon?
Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet.
F minus. You did very good. Almost the F plus. Yes, Brandy you can probably still say all the bones in the body, can't you?
No, I cannot.
Cannot. Okay. Yeah, she's a bit of a nerd.
I could, but that was a very long time ago.
So Roy G. Biv is our way of understanding. I think Isaac Newton brought this to us in the Prism, that water that seems to be one thing or colorless is a rainbow of colors. Yeah, and so in that way, who's to decide what color water is? Is it orange? Maybe if you drink from the orange river, is water indigo or violet? Yeah, if you drink from the purple stream,
Wait, how did I mess it up? What
I
did
didn't.
you say?
Did you get F plus?
You were just being...
Because I do that all the time.
You're
Because I
just
know that
being-
because overachievers hate that. See this right here? Overachievers are like, wait. How did I get? I said that to Dr. Ray Madison one time. She answered a question. I said, go to the head of the class, Dr. Ray. You get an F plus. And she said, oh no, you didn't, honey. I don't make anything but straight A's.
Dr. Ray's on tonight.
Get
him, Dr. Ray.
Dr. Ray, let me know. I do that because when I sense overachievers, I like to mess with them.
I'll get you back later.
Get me back later. All right.
Okay, let's see. Richard, hey, Lulu shared, refusing duality allows for our, she said, BS, our belief system, to dissolve. We are inherently good, born out of love. When we remember this, it allows us to forgive ourselves and heal. God loves unconditionally. We do not need anything outside ourselves to force us to do what is right.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. Our belief systems become dualistic. Think about the belief system we have right now. People, please hear me. Please hear me. I'm not encouraging this. But the belief system of that being naked is wrong. That we should always be clothed and covered. Well, who put a definition to that? Well, in the garden metaphor, even God struggled, like, who told you were naked? And not just who told you were naked, but who told you it was wrong? Is it wrong? Christian missionaries at times in the past have gone to other cultures that don't wear as much clothing because Christianity in America primarily comes from Europe, which in those days, Europe now is a lot more liberal in their sexual sentiment. But in the 17th century, Europe was not. It was very much under kind of Catholic dogma coming out of the Protestant Reformation. And so what is this idea of clothing? Does that make us holy, less holy? Think about how much clothing has been important in Christian circles. What is acceptable to wear to church? I mean, just think about the idea of modesty, where we get it. And I am not vying for nakedness. I'm 52. I should be naked less and less these days. But who put the definition on that? What makes it wrong or evil in those ways? Interesting.
Mike shared, I believe that truth is what truth is, regardless of what we think about it. While the tree of the knowledge of good and evil does not necessarily equate to the knowledge of right and wrong or truth and a lie.
Yeah, the truth you know and you accept can make you free. Yeah, the truth that you know. The other part of that is sometimes we perceive we have truth, and our perception of our perceived truth becomes our reality. So our reality feels like truth, but it isn't necessarily truth. Right? So just wait. Come Sunday, Mike. Come Sunday. We are going to unpack the Genesis creation story. I'm so excited about it because most people will lean toward one or the other. You either believe that, that God created the heavens and the earth from nothing, ex nihilo, or that God created it ex profundis, reshaped something that was already here. And there's not a lot of gray in the way that people think about that. Even some brilliant scholars still prescribe to ex nihilo. God created the earth from nothing, not the Genesis saying that God is reshaping something that was here. And so can they both be true? I don't know. It's interesting. We'll talk about it. Thanks, Mike.
Jared Johnson shared, I think it can lead to a more contextual morality. Rejecting this duality does not mean the total loss of morality, but a reconstruction.
Contextual morality. Yeah. What is morality in your culture, your context, your space, your memory, your lived experiences? That's really good, Jared. Thanks.
Let's see here. Melissa Katinger shared, does refusing the duality result in realism that things...
Not realism, relativism.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that must have been a typo. Sorry. That things or people aren't on one end of the pendulum of good or evil, but somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Somewhere in the middle between good and evil. Maybe we can have other choices as well. Maybe not what is good, what is evil. Maybe human, divine. Yeah, that's a tough one for me, Melissa. You've thrown me a curveball. Yeah, I don't know how I would frame that from my journey. What is in the middle of good and evil? Is that neutrality? So think about the smallest particles that we know of in the universe, what we call atoms. And so within the atom, there are positively charged ions, those are called protons, and negatively charged ions, those are called electrons. I don't think either one is good or bad, right? They just help to balance each other. They're not necessarily good or bad. I think that's, man, how do we begin to parse that out, right? What is good? Think about when you go to the doctor. If you're tested for a disease, if you're tested for, I'm not laughing about disease. If you're tested for a disease and the doctor comes back and says, your results are negative. If you're not used to that language, oh Lord, it's a negative report. You don't realize he's saying you don't have it. You don't have the disease. Who was it? I think Steve Harvey was talking about his mother one time. Went to the doctor and the doctor said that she was negative. And she just went into praying. The devil is a lie. He's like, no, ma'am, negative's a good thing. You don't have this thing. So yeah, I don't know how to reframe that, but that certainly will cause me some thought, Melissa. Thank you.
All right, Gaia shared, relativism seems like an evolutionary transcendental form of dualism moving beyond mere ego into a trans-egoic framework. If anything, we need to return to the tree to partake of seconds. I like it.
And sending into an evolutionary... It's interesting you brought that up, Gaia, because I was just doing some real overview research this week on spiral dynamics and what that looks like from... It's basically about the evolution of the human mind, how we perceive things, systems, how they work with each other, coming out of absolute separation, competition, finally emerging into cooperation, into oneness at some point. But those systems were set, that evolution was set into order by that, the eating of that knowledge. That's really interesting. Thanks.
All right, Andy Allison shared for all three. He said, I think all three questions have an explanation with the idea of the law of attraction. We are magnetic in being both magnetizing and repelling. It's one's energy, one power that can work positively and work negatively. I guess that's what you were just saying, right?
Yeah.
This applied to mass consciousness calls for collective positivity and negativity. This causes separation into groups and cultures and perpetuates the ideas contained within.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that's... How do we find, especially in this architecture, Reverend Allison, how do we resist the binaries? How do we... Yeah, it's, I'm a student. I almost brought all my books in that I'm reading right now. I'm reading James Cone's The Cross and the Lynching Tree. This isn't required reading. I'm just curious because I'm reading some Black liberation theology and womanist scholars right now, which is primarily black feminist theological voices. And so I'm curious about W.E.B. Du Bois, The Souls of Black Folks. I'm more curious than I've ever been about Howard Thurman, James Cone, and where that liberative mindset comes from, because I think they give to us, Reverend Allison, a ritual of resistance, if I can say that way. They allow us to keep the Bible, but to resist the parts of the Bible that become violent or that become subjugating in some ways. And so I honor the Black liberation theologians that from that comes queer theology. From that comes, historical criticism. All of our inclusive ideas really come from some initial Black liberation theologians. But in that way, how do we find a narrative that fits all of us? Maybe that's the next great move of the Holy Spirit, is to finding an entry point that's not specific to race, to gender, to sexual orientation, maybe even to religion. Is there something that is there, and what does that meta narrative really look like? That's great, Rev. Thanks.
So I just saw some Reverend Nicholas O'Rourke is on.
What you mean, Big Daddy?
I jumped in the chat.
Big Daddy Kane, Cool D.
Papa to be, soon to be Papa is on.
Excuse me, the honorable Representative Reverend Nicholas O'Rourke. Yes, we love you, sir. We honor you. Excited about the little one that's on the way. We're going to come when the Bambino arrives. We're coming up to bring some gifts and bring you a bottle of whiskey, whatever. Take you guys to dinner. Pray over the little guy. Yeah, we love you guys.
Oh, I know. Love you. All right, number 2, does a deconstruction from devil-ology mean we will have a lack of morality? Mike shared, some of the kindest, most moral people I know do not believe in either God or the devil, while many Christians who believe in the devil are some of the meanest people on earth.
Yeah. Can we be moral without needing a devil? I think, Pastor Mike, we can actually be more moral without having a devil. Why? Because we don't have something to blame our lower consciousness on. If the devil's always making us do it, we're less moral because we're not owning our missteps and our prejudices or biases. Thanks, Mike.
Michael Westmoreland shared, for question 2, even some atheists and people who do not believe in an eternal hell have a sense of morality or right and wrong.
Thank you, Michael Westmoreland. One of my favorite scholars, Dr. Bart Ehrman. He is the head of religious studies and theology at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I think he would be considered America's scholar, honestly. If America had to choose a scholar, biblical scholar, it probably would be Bart Ehrman. Some people might argue with that a little bit, but I perceive notoriety, New York Times bestsellers, things of that nature, even his understanding of cultures, archaeology, histories. But Bart Ehrman is an atheist. He teaches, he's really a New Testament scholar, but he has a great understanding of all of the canon, the codex, the collection of books. But he doesn't think that you have to believe in a God to be moral. And that's one of the big questions he gets. Why do you teach the Bible if you don't believe in God? And he said, because I love the Bible. It teaches me shows me how to be a better person, a better human being, how to treat those around me with love and kindness and empathy. And he struggles to rationalize or reconcile what we call theodicy, a good God with human suffering. That's very difficult for him. And even I've been studying this week, some black scholars who talk about the power of hope in the black church. And it comes from, kind of starting from the Exodus, that God showing up and delivering from the bondage of Exodus. The Exodus, it shows up during the emancipation in America. And so that memory, the memory of the black church really stimulates great hope. But there's also a great sorrow in the black church. That we're glad that God did deliver, but why the hell did it take so long? God, how long? How long before we were delivered from this sense of oppression? And so it's a great mixture of this black church hope and really black church grief and sorrow and questioning and, what is so the point I'm making is, do we have to believe in a devil to do good? Do we have to believe in a God to do good? I believe in God. I might redefine it at this point of my journey. I don't know that it's a specific being. I would define God more as consciousness, awareness, intuition, vibration, energy in some ways. All those make sense to me about God. But even if I didn't have a concept of God, I'm still a moral creature, whether that's through the evolution of my consciousness, my lower animal self being more dominated by my higher human self, whatever that is, whether you lean Darwin or lean Bible, there is something in humans that have an innate morality. Maybe that is a God particle that's within us, a God concept. And so I don't do good because it makes God happy. I do good because I want to do good. I'm not looking for an incentive. The incentive is in the doing good. That is the incentive that we need. That's great. Thanks.
Richard shared morality shouldn't. Why am I having a tough time saying morality tonight? I can't. I feel like I'm getting tongue tied. Excuse me, everyone. Morality.
Well, that's a blessing. Ain't that a blessing? Hey, if you're in the chat, ask more questions that make her read morality. Come on, let's go, people. Get in there.
DE, you're the devil, DE. You're my devil.
That's my lower side. It's like, more.
Morality
More people.
should never be based on devil-ology. I refuse to believe we do not inherit a conscious sense of what is good versus bad or evil at birth. Yeah.
Does think about this, the ideas of fallen nature, which Nicholas O'Rourke is on, if you're on Reverend Nicholas, goes against Pelagius and Pelagian ideas that we aren't just born depraved. Augustine, thanks Augustine for your effect on us, taking Paul's wretched man archetype and applying that to all of humanity and our filthy depraved nature. But Pelagius didn't think that way. He thought that we were good, that we had the capacity for good, and that of our own morality we were like God in that way. And so when people say that babies are born to throw fits and they must be corrected, or babies are tantrum, or they're selfish, or they take toys from, or this is mine, this is my toy, or whatever. But I watched my child share his toys. Come get a cookie from the pantry and take one to his sister. I watched my children hug without me teaching them how to hug or embrace. I watched my children laugh. I didn't teach my child how to laugh. Or I watched my children be sensitive to others crying when others would cry or were sad. Immediately they knew the vibration in the room, and they were leaning in empathetically, even as very, very little toddlers. Nobody, I didn't teach them that. And so, which side of the argument do you fall on? Is the glass half full? Are we created good, or is the glass half empty? Are we created depraved, morally corrupted by just the advent of our birth, or is there a neutrality, or is there a presence of both? An interesting conversation.
Jared said, I think some may struggle with the freedom of that loss. Many need that devil to keep them in check. So experiencing the freedom to do as you please. However, as you mature in that freedom, you learn that freedom is not about doing as you want, but doing as you ought to do.
Yeah, the freedom the freedom that can be enslaving, right, Jared? The Apostle Paul said, I'm free from the law. I'm free to do all things. All things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient. And so in our sense of interbeingness, our interconnectedness, that's a phrase from Thich Nhat Hanh, interbeing, that we interbe with all other things. None of us are islands to ourselves. If we hoard wealth, if we say that, well, it's my life, I do what I want, there are people around you that are going to be affected by your choices. And so the idea that you're in it for you, that never works. We are all intrinsically, Dr. King would say, we are all intrinsically tied in a network of mutuality. What affects one directly affects all indirectly. And of course, he applied justice narratives to that. Justice denied anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so in that way, as moral agents, it doesn't mean that we don't enjoy our lives and express our freedoms, but we also have an understanding that we are still exposed and really we are creating as architects a better collective consciousness. Thanks, Jared.
Jerica, hello, Jerica. And Jerica, tell me, do you say your last name Brochet? If so, I just love that. And if I'm wrong, you can tell me how to say it.
Jerica says her last name, Morality.
Stop it. Jerica shared, I think we are inherently good. We are products of our environment, physical or mental, and sin is just the result of intrinsic needs not being met. Absence of love equals the birth of sin.
Yeah. How do cultures become dominant? Isn't that tough, Jerica? Yeah, yeah, it's rough. I do think we are inherently good. I really do. I think we accept ideas of lack, ideas of competitiveness, but I don't think that that's necessarily our nature. I think that's something that's maybe residual from some of the animal that's still left over on the inside of us. I know that offends. That could be offensive to some Christians. I'm a creative evolutionist, but I do perceive that. I agree with you, Jericho. We are inherently good. We learn to do idiotic things like hoard and murder and rob and judge. All these things are things we learn. Thanks, Jericho.
Melissa shared Romans 2:15. If what's good is written on our hearts, conscious, then no. Deconstructed devil-ology doesn't diminish morality, but diminishes fear of a myth of a man in a red suit who wants to harm us.
What said he did? Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I could. That was so good. I couldn't add anything to it. It made me laugh from my belly. Thanks, Melissa.
Jeremy shared, I don't think we can ever, have a true morality until we get away from the devil talk. If we are only motivated by fear of the devil and hell, then we are not truly moral. We are scared, not sincere.
Yeah. So morality based in fear is really kind of a superficial morality, isn't it? Yeah. I think I've been reading so much recently. It runs in on me, people, so forgive me. But I think Karl Barth argued that if our belief and if our morality gets us to heaven, how could it really, our behavior gets us to heaven, how could it really be purity? How could it be a purity of our beingness if it's all incentivized? If we're trying to get something, is it really truly... So in that way, so stay with me, people, an atheist who doesn't believe necessarily in an afterlife or a heaven or a hell, their good deeds might outshine believers in some ways. And I don't say that believers as atheists are not believers. They believe in many things. But think about people who do things to get in to heaven or get out of hell. Is that really a pure motive, or is that incentivized in somehow?
That's such a good point.
It's a lot to think about. Atheists might be the most moral creatures on the earth.
Yep.
Good-hearted atheists might be the most moral creatures on earth because there's no necessary...
Or inclusionists.
You better include me, shorty.
What's our?
That's some pretty pure motive right there.
We fellow inclusionists are the superior religion. I'm just kidding.
That's right.
Okay.
We are the prevailing culture, right? The dominant culture.
Gaia shared morality is individual as such. Even the most evil being in history had a sense of morality. Mm-hmm. Ethics are what we should be individually and collectively striving towards.
Yeah,
that's good.
I like the exposure to the individual and the collective right there. Have you thought about this? I know you probably have, Gaia, but have you thought about how God can show up in so many different ways? So to really struggle through this Exodus narrative. So the children of Israel are supposedly in bondage in Egypt because they're being punished for not following Torah or the law. So in that way, God shows up as Pharaoh, purging them to be more holy, to follow the law. But then God shows up to deliver them from the punishment and kills Pharaoh and all the Egyptians that chase him. Now you know why I'm not a biblical literalist. There's no way. You can't define God in any way that you think you can. God is the deliverer from what? A situation that he put us in. What is going on here, people? What is this? No. God is loving us because whom the Lord loves, he chastens. Hebrews chapter 12. Yeah, but what about God using human lives as pawns? So if God raises up Pharaoh, then that's what we call a divine reprobating activity. And then God kills Pharaoh because God made him that way. How do you justify all of this Calvinistic thought? Yeah, it's a lot to think about, Guy, isn't it? Thanks.
So, all right, Joel Young is on tonight.
You better get over here, Joe Young. Give me a big hug.
And so,
that's my people's right there.
The next time I get the two of you together, I can take both of you down.
We cut up. Oh, Lord.
I will take both of you down.
She's the Firebrand OG. She'll take you down, Joe.
He shared a network of mutuality. That is a word, Obispo. And I inquire about your thoughts on morality as a form of control. Mm-hmm. And he said that Heretic movie is still on my mind. So before you answer though, he said, "I love you and Brandy both. Sorry about typing morality over and over. Morality."
You picked it up, Joel. Thank you. I owe you something.
So he said he said though, I inquire about your thoughts on morality as a form of control.
Yeah, I do think it is a form of control. We could paint both sides of that. We know that the Mosaic Law is kind of borrowed from the codes of Hammurabi. Hammurabi kind of borrowing some from early Sumerian culture. And so, yeah, think about an agrarian society, hunter-gatherers who may come into lack. And so it may be a snowy season or a drought, and maybe their neighbor has more stockpiled, more food or supplies. Instead of the neighbor sharing, if the hunger is not satisfied, is there a stealing that happens? And how do we negotiate morality? Okay, you shouldn't steal, but does that same morality apply to hoarding? If you have food and your neighbor is hungry, is it just as immoral to not share as it is to steal? Now we're really getting into relativism, right? And so, but what is more of a crime? To let someone starve, or for a starving person to steal food? How do we reconcile morality in that way? But yes, I do lean that I think there does need to be some sort of agreed upon codes. But I don't think that it should be swayed by any sense of capitalism. And I want you guys to hear me correctly. I lean heavily into Marxism, not what became the Soviet Union's kind of adulteration of that. But Karl Marx had some amazing biblical understandings of sharing things in common. Now, the negative thing about Marxist belief that I don't think was intended by Karl Marx is that it can stymie creativity. It can stymie excellence. It can put into abeyance a sense of individual expression where someone doesn't learn to cure cancer because we just hold all things in common. I understand the critiques of Marxism, but Marxism comes from Pauline Christian communism. Did you guys know that? There is a form of Christian communism that is taught in the early church. Shall I give it to you? They sold all of their possessions. No one owned anything, okay? And they shared all things in common. Now, the reason that this was a framework for the early Christians is because it was not geopolitical. It wasn't governed geographically. It wasn't governed by a specific sense of any kind of politburo or anything. It was governed by the morality in their hearts. They shared things. If anybody had a need, they gave to it. But then all of a sudden, Joel and others watching, there were people who weren't helping to work. And so everybody had sold all their possessions and they were making sure that no one had any need. The church was growing like crazy. But then it became, like most churches, 20% of the members were doing most of the work. And the other 80% were just coming in and getting their shout on and leaving, And so in that way, Paul had to say, look, if you don't work, you're not eating. You're not going to eat. You're not going to thwart this beautiful system of Christian communism, communalism that we're creating by your taking advantage of it. And so on one side, you have people taking advantage of communal living. On the other side, you have this creation of capitalism and domination. And what needs to happen is those things come into the middle where morality helps us to live together as brothers and sisters without trying to dominate each other or get one over on somebody. But that is a complex conversation.
All right, let's quickly jump in here to number 3.
Let's do it.
Do you perceive an end to dualistic thinking in our lifetimes? Mike shared, I perceive in a growing number of people, even Christians, letting go of duality, but it will never be gone. And the churches that hang on to it will be empty. They will still be full of people sitting in the pews, but the people in those churches will be empty.
Wow.
Interesting perspective.
That is an interesting. You can have a church that's full and empty. Full of empty-hearted, empty-minded people. Yeah, I want to be empty-minded. We could talk about that later, Mike. But yes, that's an interesting take on that. How do we do church without the binaries? Could be. Maybe we're embarking on it now. Thanks, Mike.
Jared shared, I think we will see non-dualistic thinking become more mainstream and more accepted, but I do not believe or perceive that duality will be completely eliminated.
Yeah, think about that word, Jared, transcendent. So some of the early transcendentalist thinkers were, like Thoreau, Kierkegaard. They were mostly ethicists as well. They were moral ethicists. But they believed that there was a transcendent part of us and a transcendent God that could not be easily defined. Yeah, that was kind of the early beginner's minds right there. So in that way, think about the word transition. Transition being that liminal space in between things. Think about transgender, between the binaries of male and female, or maybe even refusing a cisgendered ideal. Yeah, all of that is a part, I think, of the binary being broken down. Please hear me, because I get criticisms from all spaces. when you're a homeless ally like me, you don't always have a place to lay your head. But I'm not trying to force any men or women into becoming transgender, but I think it is a beautiful expression among us that is helping us to divorce ourselves from solid structures of binaries. If you're not transgender, you're not going to be transgender. It's just that is what it is. But I do think it's a beautiful gift among us that helps us to not have to have such solid definitions. Thanks.
Richard shared, unfortunately, I do not believe soon. Unfortunately, the concept has been somewhat permanently planted in our conscious state of mind. We still remain a contrasting and comparing society.
Yeah, I hope you're wrong, but I think you're right. I sure would hope for you to be wrong, Richard, but I do think we're maybe a little bit of ways away from it. But I'm hopeful. Yeah, I want to be hopeful. Though hope is frail, it's hard to kill. Right, Richard?
Sorry, I'm disrupting you. I'm about to lose my battery. My laptop is about to die. We don't want that. All right, here we go. Let's see. Gaia shared, imagine it. I am personally living it. Oh, I guess asking, imagine it? Mm-hmm. I am personally living it. Constant work on thinking in a way that feels almost alien to our species, but has a great ability to help us progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As within, so without. Maybe it starts very small, as Dr. King would say, in a pitiful minority. Have we ever seen change that was instituted by the majority? The prevailing culture doesn't want change. They're happy. They're content. They're safe. The change guy usually comes from minority voices that believe that we can have something that's more just for all people. Thanks.
All right. I want to read a couple of last ones here. I'm going to just kind of read on the fly. A couple people have said some good stuff. Andy Allison shared, empty and full simultaneously, abased and abounding.
Yeah, look at that.
Jared acknowledging he's a Kierkegaard fan. And Kat Bell said, curious how the new Pope will view things, as the last one was more inclusive. So did something happen officially there, or are you just thinking out loud, Kat? It's on the way. Okay, all right.
We don't know.
I just haven't watched.
Let's not speak of it.
Okay. Let's not speak of it. I haven't watched the news this week, so I was like, did I miss something? And then Guy has shared, you just made a paradox out of my paradox. I have risen beyond dualism, but my ontology still encompasses dualistic thought. I suppose it's just I'm not bound to it anymore. Yeah. And shared, wow, what great comments tonight. What a beautiful response, Spirit and Truth. Yes, I definitely like to think we are taking a stroll through Eden together tonight. I love that.
Ain't that beautiful? Ain't that beautiful?
Oh, I see. That was in response to my comment earlier where Gaia had shared. Let me scroll back up and read that. Essentially, it was, if anything, we need to return to the tree to partake of seconds. I think I said, that really resonated with me. Isn't that what we're doing here tonight, is kind of eating seconds and thirds and just going right on back to that tree for more?
I think so. Yeah, I like the use of ontology, the study of existence. Sometimes even metaphysics slips into ontology. How do we know that we exist? What is our existential understanding of ourselves? Yeah, that's some seminary words.
Ding ding ding! Guess what time it is?
It's chicken wing time.
It's time.
We've gotten into a groove of going to this chicken wing joint on Wednesday nights, and so Brandy gets excited. Is Joel Young still on? Can you tell? I don't know if you can tell.
Joel, jump in the chat if you're still here.
Joel Young is good people.
Yeah. Good people. So tonight, just family. Those of you who were on waiting patiently, I had a hour and 40-minute drive home from work. I was off at our corporate headquarters far away. I was rushing, and I got in at 7:23. It was like, woo, rushing. Anyway, thank you for being patient with us. On. We love you. We're going to get some chicken wings with our Micah, aren't we?
Chicken wings, people. Yep. We'll forego the affirmation at the end. I do want to encourage you guys to be either present in person or virtually Sunday, if at all possible. I think we're gonna wrestle with some interesting concepts on Sunday. All praise be to God. Amen, somebody. All right, if you have a chance to give, help us support what we do. We certainly want to keep our community vibrant and alive. We love you guys. We'll see you again. No affirmation. We'll see you guys Friday morning devotion, and then Sunday morning on the Lord's Day. Go in peace.